This morning in your morning checkup, a study on peanut allergies could have big implications for future generations. Wish TV medical expert Dr. Janelle Gordon joining us with information on what this could mean going forward. Good morning, Dr. Gordon.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, good. This is a big deal. What is this study and what does it tell us?
It's a big deal. So this study that was just published this week in the American Academy of Pediatrics Journal, confirming findings from a 2015 study actually out of London, which showed early introduction of peanuts in infancy can decrease the risk of peanut allergies in children, and 80% of children to be exact. And that can actually persist into adolescence in about 70% of kids.
What do the current medical guidelines call for in this?
So since that study came out, over the last decade, the guidelines did call for us to introduce the allergen early to children, as opposed to in previous years when we used to recommend holding off until around 3 years of age. What we found is that only about a third of pediatricians are actually recommending early introduction, and just over 60% of allergists, the specialists, are even recommending it.
What does that look like, introducing something like that to an infant? Because I think people go, wait a second, how do we even do this?
For sure, and then you might have family members who have been parents of many and for many years who say, no, you can't do that. However, the findings do show that if you introduce a little bit of the peanuts at a time, a few times a week, you don't need large amounts, then that can actually prep the child's immune system to this and hopefully decrease the risk of having allergies.
Why are the findings of this study promising?
Yes, it is promising. For one, it does show us that public health messaging actually can make a difference in the lives, especially of our very young. So if we actually do start to put this into practice, and it's not uncommon for things to take a while in medicine, it's typically around a 7 to 10 year mark where we actually start to see things become common practice. However, it does show us that we can actually make a difference, and not just for peanuts, but also some of the other big 9 allergens, such as sesame, soy, tree nuts, which could include almonds, cashews, and even walnuts.
Milk, dairy, often the most common of allergens for people and children. Is it the same process, peanuts, across all of those that you mentioned as well, when it comes to introducing these in that way to children?
So that is what it's showing us, that if we do introduce a little bit at a time, and we don't want to overload the child. We don't want to give them pistachios, walnuts, cashews, and sesame spread. And then if they end up with symptoms, we're unsure what actually may have caused it. So it is best to just do one new food item at a time, and a little bit at a time, a few times a week.
Is this something that needs to be brought up to the pediatrician first before we start just funneling these things to our kids and seeing what works and what doesn't?
That's a very great question. So according to researchers, you do not need to do any screening beforehand to see if your child is allergic. You can just simply introduce the item. If you do have concerns, it is always best to speak with your trusted healthcare provider who does know you and your child best. If you do introduce it and the child does develop symptoms, then it's best to have that child evaluated. Obviously, if they're having trouble breathing, if they're turning colors, you need to get to the emergency room. However, it is less likely that this will happen in most children.
Sure. Dr. Gordon, thank you. As always, a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.
Good information here.